You see that young man over there? That's my son. Now, he's looking at me saying, Dad, when you're in your 90s, you're going to be driving me around. You're setting a bad example for my kid.
No.
You're putting a lot of pressure on me. I wish the best for your son, and I wish you good health, and your case is dismissed. Good luck to you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
It's not often that the passing of a judge makes headlines around the world. But when news broke that Judge Frank Caprio had died at the age of 88, millions felt as though they had lost a friend. For decades, he wasn't just another figure in a courtroom robe. He was a symbol of compassion, a reminder that justice could be delivered with kindness instead of cruelty. And in an age when trust in authority is often shaky, Judge Caprio managed to stand out as a rare figure people actually admired. If you've ever stumbled across one of his viral clips online, you know why. The man who sat at the bench in Providence, Rhode Island, had a unique ability to make even the smallest traffic case feel like a story worth listening to. Instead of scolding people for mistakes, he listened. Instead of acting superior, he joked with them, and instead of treating fines as nothing more than money, he looked at the person standing before him and asked what was fair. That small shift, seeing defendants as human beings, turned Frank Caprio into something much bigger than a local judge. He became a global phenomenon, known to millions simply as the nicest judge in the world. But behind the viral moments and headlines was a man with a remarkable life story. Born into poverty, the son of Italian immigrants, he worked his way up from shining shoes to presiding over a courtroom watched by millions. His story is about far more than parking tickets and traffic violations. It's about resilience, humility, and the power of compassion in places you'd least expect it. Today, as we look back at the life of Judge Frank Caprio, we're not just remembering a man who made people smile in court. We're honoring someone who redefined what justice could look like. From his humble beginnings, to the viral fame of Caught in Providence, to his final message of gratitude and kindness, his life left behind a blueprint of how one person's humanity can touch the world. And to understand why his death feels so personal to so many, we have to start at the beginning, back when Frank Caprio was just a young boy in Providence, long before the robe, the cameras, or the fame. If his kindness moved you, help spread the message. Hit like and subscribe, and let's share Judge Caprio's humanity with the world. Long before the world knew him as Judge Caprio, he was simply Francesco Caprio, a boy growing up in Providence, Rhode Island. Born in 1936, he was the second of 7 children in an Italian immigrant family that knew what it meant to struggle. His father worked as a fruit peddler, pushing a cart through the streets, while his mother kept the household running with whatever little they had. For the Caprios, money was always tight, but love and discipline were never in short supply. Frank's childhood was defined by responsibility. He learned early that nothing in life would be handed to him. To help support his family, he shined shoes, delivered newspapers, and took on any odd job he could find. These weren't just chores for pocket money. They were necessities, and each small job carried lessons that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Humility, patience, and the understanding that every person, no matter their role in society, deserved respect. Despite the hardships, Frank's family never let go of their values. Education was emphasized as the only real way forward. Teachers quickly noticed his intelligence, and even more importantly, his kindness. He wasn't the loudest or the toughest kid in the neighborhood, but he was the one people gravitated toward because he listened, because he cared. It was in these formative years that Caprio developed his deep empathy for people struggling under the weight of circumstances. Watching his father work long hours in the cold to make ends meet, or seeing neighbors go without, gave him a first-hand understanding of hardship. Later, when people stood before him in court explaining why they couldn't pay a parking fine, he wasn't hearing excuses, he was hearing echoes of the same struggles he grew up around. But perhaps the most telling detail of his youth was that Frank never dreamed of fame or riches. He dreamed of stability, of making life a little easier for his family, and of serving his community in a way that mattered. That seed of service, planted in poverty, would eventually grow into the career that made him beloved worldwide. And while his beginnings were humble, Frank Caprio's ambition quietly burned inside him. He knew education was his path forward, and soon he would make the leap from working-class kid to a young man with a vision for something greater. The journey from those streets of Providence to the bench of a courtroom was just beginning. Frank Caprio's rise from the working-class streets of Providence to the judge's bench wasn't a straight line. After finishing high school, he was determined to continue his education, even though the odds were stacked against him. Money was scarce, but determination was abundant. He enrolled at Providence College, where he balanced academics with jobs to help support himself and his family. His discipline and relentless work ethic paid off, and after graduation, he set his sights on law school. He attended Suffolk University Law School in Boston, traveling back and forth while still helping his family back home. It wasn't easy. Long hours of study, long commutes, and constant financial pressure. But for Frank, it wasn't about personal glory. It was about using education as a tool to serve others. By the time he graduated, he had already earned a reputation among classmates for being approachable, funny, and unusually empathetic for a young man studying law. Before becoming a full-time lawyer, Frank actually worked as a high school teacher. Standing in front of a classroom of teenagers taught him patience and communication skills that would later become his trademarks in the courtroom. He knew how to talk to people, not at them. He could break down complex issues into plain language, something few lawyers and judges ever mastered. By the late 1960s, he had built a career in law and was beginning to get involved in politics. He served on the Providence City Council, where he developed a reputation as someone who cared deeply about local issues and ordinary citizens, rather than playing into political games. This balance of law and public service made him the perfect candidate for the judicial bench. In 1985, Frank Caprio was appointed Chief Judge of the Providence Municipal Court, a role he would hold for nearly 4 decades. From the very beginning, he refused to adopt the stern, intimidating persona that many judges wear like armor. Instead, he brought with him the same humor and humanity that had defined him since childhood. To him, a courtroom wasn't a place to humiliate people. It was a place to listen, to reason, and when possible, to forgive. That philosophy would eventually transform not only his courtroom, but also his career. Because when cameras started rolling inside that Providence courtroom, the world discovered what local residents already knew. Judge Caprio was unlike any other. For years, Frank Caprio quietly presided over the Providence Municipal Court, earning respect in his community. But it wasn't until cameras entered his courtroom that the rest of the world saw what made him so extraordinary. The television program, Caught in Providence, began as a small local show airing cases of traffic violations and minor offenses. At first glance, it didn't sound like the kind of program that would capture a worldwide audience. Who really wants to watch people argue over parking tickets? But Judge Caprio made it different. He turned the ordinary into something unforgettable. Every defendant who stood before him wasn't just another case file. They were a person with a story. And instead of brushing off those stories, Caprio leaned in. He listened to the single mother struggling to put food on the table, the elderly man living on a fixed income, or the young kid who simply made a mistake. Where another judge might see excuses, Caprio saw humanity. The show captured moments that felt more like conversations between neighbors than courtroom hearings. Sometimes, he'd call children up to the bench and let them decide their parents' fine, leaving the entire room laughing. Other times, he would waive fees entirely after hearing about someone's hardships, saying things like, "You've paid enough in life." These moments of compassion struck a chord with viewers. In a world filled with harsh headlines and constant division, Judge Caprio's kindness felt like a breath of fresh air. Clips from Caught in Providence began circulating online, first gaining traction locally, then exploding across social media. Platforms like YouTube and Facebook turned small courtroom snippets into viral sensation. Millions tuned in, not for the drama of crime, but for the reassurance that empathy still existed. Videos of Judge Caprio reached hundreds of millions of views, making him a global figure almost overnight. It was an unusual kind of fame. He wasn't a Hollywood star or a politician, but his presence was more impactful than either. People around the world began referring to him as the nicest judge in the world. Letters poured in from viewers saying his compassion restored their faith in humanity. Some even traveled to Providence just to sit in his courtroom and witness his unique brand of justice firsthand. By the time Caught in Providence became a household name, Frank Caprio was no longer just a local judge. He had become a symbol, a reminder that authority, when paired with kindness, could inspire people everywhere. But behind that philosophy was something much deeper than television entertainment. His courtroom fame was built on a belief system that had guided him his entire life. What made Judge Frank Caprio so beloved wasn't just his warm smile or quick sense of humor. It was his philosophy, a belief that justice without compassion wasn't justice at all. While many judges prided themselves on being tough, Caprio believed strength could come from empathy. In his eyes, a courtroom was never about punishment for punishment's sake. It was about fairness, understanding, and sometimes mercy. To Caprio, each case was more than a violation of the law. It was a story. He recognized that behind every unpaid ticket or missed court date was a human being carrying struggles that weren't always visible on paper. When a man stood before him explaining that he had skipped his court date because he was undergoing cancer treatment, Caprio didn't see defiance. He saw courage. When a mother admitted she couldn't afford the fine because she was choosing between paying for groceries or paying the city, he didn't see irresponsibility. He saw sacrifice. His philosophy often came through in small but powerful gestures. Sometimes he would reduce a fine dramatically, saying that life had already punished the person enough. Other times he would offer a second chance, telling someone that their mistake didn't define who they were. And perhaps most famously, he would invite children into the process, letting a young boy or girl decide their parents' punishment. It wasn't just cute television. It was Caprio's way of reminding everyone that the justice system could be human, relatable, even hopeful. This approach resonated deeply with audiences because it flipped the script on how we think about authority. Judges are often portrayed as distant figures, sitting high above those they rule over. But Caprio sat closer to the people, both literally and figuratively. He laughed with them, listened to them, and sometimes even cried with them. His message was simple but revolutionary. Kindness and justice don't have to be opposites. They can exist side by side. It was this philosophy that made him a symbol of hope, far beyond Rhode Island. People didn't share his videos because of the cases themselves. They shared them because of the reminder they carried. A reminder that empathy still matters, that authority can be gentle, and that compassion isn't weakness, but strength. And as word of his unique approach spread, Frank Caprio's reputation grew far beyond the borders of his city. Soon, his influence reached audiences worldwide, making him not just a local judge, but a global inspiration. By the time Caught in Providence became a global hit, Judge Frank Caprio was no longer just the pride of Rhode Island. He was a worldwide figure. What had started as short clips of traffic cases on local television had transformed into an international phenomenon. Viewers from Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond found themselves glued to a small municipal courtroom in Providence, eager to watch a man who proved that kindness could live inside the law. Major media outlets picked up his story. He was profiled on national morning shows, interviewed by international newspapers, and celebrated online as the nicest judge in the world. What made this recognition remarkable was how rare it is for a municipal judge, someone dealing with parking tickets and small fines, to capture the attention usually reserved for celebrities and world leaders. Yet Caprio's videos outperformed Hollywood trailers and political speeches because they carried something the world was craving: authenticity. Letters and emails poured in from every corner of the globe. Teachers wrote to him saying they used his clips in classrooms to teach students about empathy. Other judges admitted that watching Caprio had inspired them to rethink the way they treated people in court. Ordinary citizens shared stories of how his kindness gave them hope during their darkest days. He wasn't just entertaining people, He was touching their lives in ways that rippled far beyond the courtroom. In Providence, visitors began showing up just to watch him in action. Tourists who had traveled thousands of miles to see landmarks in New York or Boston made a special detour to Rhode Island just to sit in his courtroom. For them, meeting Judge Caprio wasn't like meeting a TV star. It was like meeting a moral compass. Despite the fame, Caprio remained humble. He often joked that he was just an old guy in a small courtroom who happened to be filmed, but deep down he knew the impact of his work. His approach was showing the world that empathy could be just as powerful as authority. That recognition became his legacy long before he passed away. But as his global influence grew, life was preparing him for a battle that no amount of compassion or humor could easily overcome. In 2023, Frank Caprio revealed something that shook his fans to the core, a diagnosis that would mark the final chapter of his life. In December 2023, Judge Frank Caprio shared news that stunned the millions of people who admired him around the world. In a heartfelt video message, he revealed that he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and difficult forms of the disease. His voice was calm, his demeanor steady, but his words carried the weight of someone confronting life's most difficult battle. "I'm in the fight of my life," he told his supporters, "and I need your prayers." It wasn't just a statement, it was an invitation for people to walk alongside him during his final chapter. And just as he had offered compassion to so many others, the world now sent compassion back to him. Messages of love and encouragement flooded his social media pages. Fans from across the globe prayed, shared stories of how his kindness had touched their lives, and promised that his legacy was already secure. Even as his health declined, Caprio continued to radiate positivity. He expressed gratitude for every message he received, often saying that he was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. He didn't frame his diagnosis as a tragedy, but as another part of life's journey. His attitude was a lesson in itself, that dignity, gratitude, and courage could exist even in the face of suffering. By August 2025, his condition had worsened. On August 20, surrounded by family and with the prayers of millions echoing worldwide, Judge Frank Caprio passed away at the age of 88. The announcement sparked an immediate wave of tributes. In Providence, flags were lowered to half-mast. On social media, people from every continent shared their favorite moments from Caught in Providence, remembering the way he made them laugh, cry, and believe in the goodness of humanity. His death wasn't just the loss of a beloved local figure. It felt deeply personal to millions who had never met him in person. For them, Judge Caprio wasn't just a judge, he was proof that compassion could change the way we see the world. And while his life ended, his influence was far from over. Because the true measure of a legacy isn't what happens while someone is alive, it's what continues after they're gone. And for Judge Caprio, that legacy was only just beginning. When the news of Judge Frank Caprio's passing spread, the response was unlike anything you'd expect for a municipal judge. Politicians, celebrities, teachers, and everyday people all spoke of him with the same words: kindness, compassion, humility. Flags in Providence flew at half-mast, and online, millions of tributes poured in. People didn't just share condolences, they shared stories. A mother who cried watching him forgive another parent's fine. A cancer survivor who found strength in his empathy towards someone battling the same illness. A teacher who played his videos in class to show that justice could have a human face. That is the true measure of a legacy. Not titles, not wealth, not fame, but the impact you leave on hearts. Frank Caprio never set out to become a global figure. He wasn't chasing headlines or viral fame. All he ever did was treat people with dignity, even when they stood before him accused of breaking the law. That simple act of kindness resonated so deeply that it turned a local courtroom into a worldwide symbol of hope. His philosophy continues to challenge the way we think about justice. Do laws exist only to punish, or can they also heal? Must authority always feel intimidating, or can it be reassuring? Through his example, Caprio showed that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. and perhaps more importantly, he showed that every position of power, no matter how small, carries the ability to change lives when guided by empathy. In many ways, his legacy is timeless. Generations from now, people will still stumble across those videos of a gentle judge listening to ordinary people and offering them grace. And they'll feel the same thing audiences felt during his lifetime, that hope and humanity are still alive. Judge Caprio once said that he wanted to be remembered not for the cases he decided, but for the kindness he showed. And in that wish, he succeeded beyond measure. His life stands as proof that the way we treat others, especially when we hold power over them, defines us far more than any achievement or accolade. So as we say goodbye to the nicest judge in the world, perhaps the greatest tribute we can offer isn't in words, but in actions. Every time we choose compassion over judgment, patience over anger, or kindness over cruelty, we carry forward the legacy of Frank Caprio. He may be gone, but the humanity he represented lives on in everyone who chooses to follow his example. And in the end, that may be his most enduring ruling, that justice with compassion is not only possible, it's the only kind of justice that truly matters.